Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the BDU podcast. Today, I'm delighted to have Amor Sexton with us, who will be providing some fantastic insights. Hello, Amor. How are you keeping?
Good, thank you.
Fantastic. And I suppose, Amor, just to kick off the podcast, could you please tell us a bit about what you do here at Blockdaemon?
Sure. So I'm general manager of Ireland, which means that I do a little bit of everything. It's a bit of a mixed bag, which is absolutely why I love the role. You know, my daily work life can be everything from looking at our commercial strategy to working on operating models, to looking at our corporate structuring and working with our legal and compliance team, to looking at our regulatory strategy as well. So it's a little bit of everything, focused mainly on our staking business because that Ireland is really the home of that business. But general manager role is pretty mixed.
Fantastic. That brings me nicely on to my next question. What does a typical 9 to 5 look like for you, Amor?
It really depends on the day, again, because I think the role is so varied. I think given that we're so dispersed around Blockdaemon, my afternoons and my evenings tend to be the busiest. So I get a good bit of heads down time in the morning. I have 2 kids, so I'm kind of able to get up with them, get them off to school, and then try and get through a lot of the more reading and written work in the morning. And then my afternoons are usually pretty busy from around 2 o'clock on until the evening on calls. But again, like it really does depend because I work cross-functionally across all the different teams. It could be also jumping into workshops, collaborating on different documents or different pieces of work that the teams are running, or it could just be on those one-to-one calls that I mentioned. So I'd say there's probably no typical day for me.
Fantastic. That brings me on to the next question is, if you could pinpoint a skill which allows you to, operate at your high level of operational efficiency, what would be that skill?
I think probably the main one that I use in my job is I've been told before that I'm really good at joining dots, which I think is kind of what you need to do when you have a role that's as mixed as mine. So it could potentially be joining dots between teams. So seeing across the business what different teams are working on and understanding where we can, potentially collaborate and join the efforts of a couple of teams to be able to create more efficiencies, reduce inefficiencies, or even just to get a better result. But then it can also be concepts as well. I think on the regulatory and legal side, it's such an evolving space and there's so many new developments that our regulatory frameworks have not necessarily dealt with before, and being able to join those dots as well and see how we can look at existing frameworks to be able to apply them to these new activities and new technologies, or maybe not apply them as well, but just being able to see those connections and join the dots from that perspective.
Fantastic. I love that analogy of joining the dots. And I suppose it brings me on to my next question. What would you have liked to have known at the start of your career, which would have helped you now? And I suppose that question also, it covers how did you end up in blockchain and the crypto world?
Yeah, I think they're really connected because the number one thing that I would tell my younger self is that it's okay to change careers. It's okay to kind of take those other paths. You don't necessarily have to follow that one path. And I think that's really evident with me. I've done everything from being a practicing lawyer who specialized in crypto to working in innovation and digital transformation in banking. I've run development teams, I've run design teams. And I think one of the things that I've learned throughout my career is the most important thing is that you're doing really interesting work and work that interests you, trying to do what you think you should do or what's expected of you, following that traditional path. If you're not interested, to me, success is more than just what your job title is. It's being able to, have a life that you don't live to work, you don't work to live, or live to work. You've got that kind of element of your working life where you enjoy it. Because I definitely think that if you enjoy what you're doing, you're going to be more successful in the long term anyway. So I think, when you come out of school, you tend to be put in a box a little bit by the career advisors. You have to decide what you need to study next. And then once you're you've put all that hard work into getting that degree or getting the qualification, then you think that that's what you have to do. And my big piece of advice would be, have an open mind. Don't be afraid to make a change if it interests you, because in the long run it will be okay. And in fact, it could actually even end up being an amazing move for you in the long term.
Fantastic. And I suppose my next question is, what gives you positivity? It may be in your work life or in your, your private life. What gives you enthusiasm, Amor?
It's a bit of a cliche to say complex problem solving with collaborative teams, but it's genuinely true. I think I love a challenge. I love order and structure, and I'm very organized as a person, but I'm also very comfortable with chaos and ambiguity, because I love that process of, being faced with a really meaty problem or challenge and figuring it out and trying to find the solution. But I genuinely think that the best solutions are where you bring in so many different points of view. Even if it's an engineering problem, I think bringing in the sales team and getting their view on it and seeing if they have anything to add. If it's a sales problem, bringing in the engineers. I really do believe that cross-functional input into problem solving really delivers the best result. It also helps with just building a great culture, and it's more fun. Problems can seem overwhelming when you're trying to tackle them on your own, and I think that's what really kind of gives me energy at work, when we have workshops and we have different initiatives where there's a bunch of us from across the team, from across the business, who are kind of working together as a team to tackle something and solving it. It's less fun if you can't find a solution, but the majority of the time you can usually come to a point where you've at least solved a big part of the problem.
Fantastic. And I suppose the next question is there anything exciting happening within your area or in the external market that in the blockchain or crypto world that you've become aware of, that you'd like our listeners to be aware of also?
I think probably one of the most exciting things, I don't think I'm allowed to talk about yet, but I would say definitely stay tuned and follow Blockdaemon. We've got a pretty exciting announcement coming up. I think it's an announcement that has to do with growth, with our product suite. I can't wait for that to be announced. I think it's super exciting. I think as well, I don't know that exciting would be the word I'd use for what's going on in the market at the moment, but I definitely think it's a fantastic opportunity to focus across the market on building sustainably. I think in the long term, what we'll see is a really big focus on, I use the word institutionalization of business activities, but I don't necessarily mean that as in you only have to serve institutional customers. I just mean, if you think about the volumes, the traction that a lot of companies were getting from an operational perspective, from that foundational perspective, I think there was a lot of room to improve. And I think the focus now on building that really solid base for growth, I personally find it quite exciting and positive, because I'm a kind of a boring operational person. So I try and, whenever things are happening in the market, like what we're going through at the moment, I try and see the positives. And I think that will be a positive development to come out of the really kind of unfortunate circumstances that some of the industry are finding themselves in.
Fantastic. And I suppose my last question revolves around, if someone's listening here and they might be a student or they might be in industry, not specifically in the blockchain industry, and they're interested in getting into the type of role you are in, Amor, because you mentioned your legal background, what advice would you give them if they are interested in getting into this type of role?
So there's probably two things. I think for as far as it's kind of like, as far as you would talk about breaking into the industry, it's that joining the dots type discussion. There may be a role that you see online. Like when I first moved from being a lawyer to an innovation manager at Citibank, that's a sideways leap. that I remember at the time when I applied for the role, I was thinking there's no way they're going to even interview me. So I reached out to them and I joined those dots for them. And I said, look, these are the areas that I've been working on. This is how I think that I'd be able to do this job. And don't be afraid to do that. If you think that you have a skill set that is transferable into the industry, don't be afraid to join those dots for yourself and also for the company that you're applying for, because it's not always obvious, especially if it's a role that's not necessarily common in the industry. So you need to help the company understand how you can really bring those skills and utilize them effectively. And then I think the other one is just be resilient, keep your eye on the long term. It's still very early days for the technology in the industry. You're going to have moments like we're going through right now. We've been through them before. Focus on the long term, on the kind of goal of where the industry is trying to go, where the companies are trying, where your company is trying to go, and keep that resilience and that positivity, and always look to try and keep moving forward and kind of block out some of the noise.
Fantastic. I really love that word, resilience. And that brings us to the end of the questioning. Thanks, Amor, for giving up your time today. I'm sure the listeners will find those insights fantastic, and really appreciate you appearing on the latest edition of the BDU podcast.
No problem. Thank you.